All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the East Bay Historia info session. My name is Professor Alexander, and I've been the advisor of the East Bay Historia since 2017 when it first started. And we are here today with two amazing people. First, we have Jenny Shaw. And in 2021, she was one of our authors, and she was also the editor-in-chief of the East Bay Historia. And then we have Carla Vega, who was an author in 2021. She was the editor-in-chief in 2020, and she was the chief design officer in 2019. So she's worn a lot of hats and can answer a lot of our questions today. So we're going to start out talking just about what it's like to become an author for the East Bay Historia. And let's first talk about what is the East Bay Historia. The East Bay Historia is the Department of History's annual publication that comes out every spring. And what it is actually a book-length publication that includes essays by current and former students. And this has been such a sense of pride in our department, and our students feel like they've accomplished so much once their essays come into print and they get this copy of a beautiful journal to share with their family. So these journals end up showcasing student research by mainly CSU EV students. And you can see here, we started in 2017, and every year we've just gotten better and better. The production design has gotten amazing, and we can talk about that more later. So that's kind of what the East Bay Historia is. And let me move on to Carla, who's going to talk about why you should submit an essay to the East Bay Historia.
So I think you should submit an essay. Maybe it's a little selfish, but it just feels really good to know that you have something published. And I mean, it's usually something that you worked really hard on or that you're really passionate about. So just to know that that's out in the world along with all these other really amazing essays is just such a great feeling. And you just feel really accomplished with that. Plus, you also get to put it on your resume that you're a published author, and that also looks really good when you're applying for like an internship or even for a job. And I just think that's another really big plus. And you get to be part of a community of these published authors, and an awesome editorial board gets to help you out with their notes and stuff. So I think you should submit it just for the experience, and then for the added plus of having it as one of your accomplishments.
Yeah, and then let's have Jenny talk a little bit about the submission process. So we have this slide for you telling all about that. Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah, so when you submit an essay for the Historia, you're going to submit it online on the Historia's website by February 1st. And that is a hard deadline. Unfortunately, while things happen in people's lives, if we allow deadlines to slide, then it pushes back the whole publication. So it is February 1st. And at that point, your paper goes on to a blind peer review process. So you'll have about 3 to 5 students within the public history course who are on the editorial board who will all read your paper and then come back and discuss it as a group. And they'll give you lots of notes about what made it a strong paper, what you might need to improve upon, maybe even a little bit of grammatical feedback. And then that group that has all read your paper will decide whether your paper should be published or not. If it's not published, they'll give you advice on what to do in the future to make it publishable. Like maybe, I know in 2021, we had an amazing grad student proposal submitted, and we didn't take it because it was a proposal and not a paper, but we encouraged that author to submit a paper because the writing was just so amazing. I wish we had taken it. It was really well done. So don't take a rejection personally. It's just encouragement for the next time. If it gets accepted, you'll be notified in late February, and then you'll have time to revise and resubmit your paper. So you can make any little changes that you need to. Then the editorial board will go through, make copy edits, change the format of it, and then it'll be published, and you'll be a published author in a journal, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and let me just note one little thing. When you submit, the editorial board does not know your name. Everything becomes anonymous, and you will not know who's reviewing your paper. So that's kind of the double blind part of the peer review. It's all anonymous except for the advisors. I was doing it until this year, and then Dr. Ivy's taking over, and she'll know who submitted, but that's it. Thanks, Jenny. The next slide, let's talk about, what makes a good essay. So what makes a publishable essay? And we spend a lot of time talking about this in our class, and I want to share with you the East Bay Historia website. Here we go. And you can go and find this at any time. If you scroll down a little bit, you have all of our former publications, but then you also have this evaluation form that you can check out. And the editorial board has created this, and every year they tweak it a little bit, and they spend a lot of time discussing what makes a publishable essay, what is something that's that we can use to kind of make a rubric to decide this. So if you submit an essay, you're going to get 3 or 4 of these forms back. And the reviewers, again, they won't know who you are, you won't know who they are. They will give you a recommendation of, yes, publish without substantial changes, publish with revisions, maybe, resubmit it next year. They'll have a little check mark. But this is the part I want to show you down here. And you can go and look at this at any time on our website. We are going to be evaluating you on these questions here. So what makes a good essay is looking at letter A. Does the paper bring an original, insightful concept or viewpoint? So we don't want anything just a rehash of World War II, blow by blow of World War II, that kind of thing. You have to have your own spin on it, your own unique interpretation. The second one is there should be a thesis. So this is definitely a thesis-driven publication, and make sure that your thesis is clear and concise. Under each of these letters, the editorial board members are going to give you extensive comments. Usually they're like a paragraph per letter. So they're going to pull out your thesis and tell you, like, I think this is your thesis. If it's not your thesis, you might want to try to work on clarifying that a little bit. Looking at C, they really want a good introduction. Introduction is the best part of the essay. This is what grabs the reader's attention. If you need a good example, go read Carla Vega's essay from 2021, where she actually talks about her grandma, who was a Cristero participant. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but it was a fantastic introduction that really grabbed everyone's attention, and it offered some historical context as well. So make sure you're coming in with a strong introduction. Then D is more about organization. Do you have transition sentences? Does your paragraph 1 flow into paragraph 2 and it makes sense to the editorial board? And then the last thing the editorial board really looks at, do you provide enough evidence? Do you provide secondary sources to back up your claims? Maybe primary sources if that's the type of essay you're looking at. All of this to support your thesis. And are you analyzing those sources? So when you're revising your papers and you're ready to submit, go back through these 5 points and make sure that you're hitting on each of them, because you're going to have 3 or 4 sets of eyes looking specifically for this. And that's how they'll decide, which of these categories your essay fits in. Yeah, so that's available on the East Bay Historia website. And let's go back to this slide then. Next up, we have, excuse me, okay. Carla is going to talk about the sad reality, what happens if your essay gets rejected, which happens.
It happens, and it's not fun for anybody because the more essays, the better. But sometimes it's just better to work on your essay and then resubmit it next year, which is what we suggest if your essay does get rejected. On the evaluation, with all of the notes that you get from your peer reviewers, you can use those notes that they have to revise your essay and just resubmit it next year. And you'll have a lot better chance if you go through and make sure that you have all those points nice and clear. So you have a really nice, strong essay.
All right, thanks, Carla. And Jenny gets to talk about the fun stuff. What happens if your essay gets accepted?
So if your essay gets accepted, you get a brief moment to celebrate, and then you have to get back to work because it isn't accepted as is for the most part. Carla's, for example, when she submitted in 2021, was almost flawless, but she still had edits that she had to make. It's just the truth. When you're writing your own paper, you get really close to it, and having somebody else read it, they can notice little things like a sentence that doesn't quite make sense, but if you reword it, it'll make sense. So you go through, and with the suggestions that the editorial board has made, you revise your paper. And the revision process usually is pretty quick, but just depending on what your revision is, it might be a little more detailed. Like maybe your footnotes weren't in Chicago style format, maybe they were in MLA format. And so you have to go through and change all of your footnotes. So just be prepared that even if your work gets accepted, you still have a little bit more work to do.
And generally that turnaround is about 2 weeks. So it's quick, but it's necessary for us to actually get the publication out by the end of the semester. All right, thanks, Jenny. One of the fun developments we've had over the last couple of years is we've paired up with Chico State artists, and they're art students, and they're working in a digital illustration class. And they end up reading the essays that are accepted for publication and creating their own interpretation of those essays through illustration. And this has been such a fun development. This is not something that happens in the real world with historical publications, and I wish it did, because I would love to see some of my essays interpreted by artists. So this is actually just one of the fun things that you'll get to see. You'll get to see how an artist who's not a historian interprets your essay and creates this beautiful, beautiful art that will accompany your essay. So that is a bonus that you get when you are accepted. And then Carla is going to talk about how do you submit.
So you submit your essay on the East Bay Historia website. Down at the very bottom of the web page, it has the submission form. So you want to put your name, your email, the title of your essay. You want to include an abstract of what your essay is about, no more than 150 words, and a bio, also no more than 150 words, with just information about you, your major, grade level, your historical interest, career goals, and any other relevant information. And then you just upload your essay and submit it.
Yeah, and that's all right on our East Bay Historia website, and the essays go directly to the advisor, so Dr. Ivy in 2022. And our last slide is just if you have any questions about the submission process. So any questions from our audience today while we're here?
So I don't think I have really too many questions or anything. One thing I was wondering, is there any time that you feel like where you've had like it's like been like on the borderline and then something like kind of changed your mind, like something small, like does length ever like really matter for this, like considering, or I'm just curious if there's any of like those like little borderline things that like will like tweak your decision or anything like that. If that makes sense.
That's a great question. I'm gonna let Jenny and Carla take it, because this is, we have a lot of debates, historical debates about what essays to accept and reject in the editorial process.
Length doesn't really play a part in it. It can be as short or as long as is appropriate for the paper. And that's not going to determine whether we take it, unless, you know, maybe it's one paragraph long and there's no content, then we might not take it. But length really is not a determining factor. If the panel, that the blind review group that is assigned to read your essay, cannot come to a decision though, and this happened last semester where it was 2 people wanted it, 2 people didn't, then the editor-in-chief actually has to vote on whether or not the paper should be accepted. And it's discussed in the class as a group before any decision is made, with all of the points of why it should be accepted and why it shouldn't. So the editor-in-chief does have the final say if it's not an easy answer, but that is a rare extreme.
Yeah, to kind of add on to that, in 2020, we had a big debate on one essay in particular that lasted a pretty long time, because people were making really good points to have the essay put into the journal. Other people were making good points to not put it into the journal. Eventually, we agreed to keep it in, but it's pretty interesting to see people debate and to come to an agreement. But yeah, that usually only happens on the borderline ones, though.
And there's no quota. We don't have a minimum number of essays that we accept or a maximum. It just really depends on the year and how many essays were submitted and what their quality was.
Awesome.
There are, sorry, if I can add one more thing. There are some essays last year that we got that we really heavily debated about accepting them, but rejected them because we weren't sure if it was too much work for the author to revise them in the time limit. So that might be a factor in it too, is it realistic that it's a 2-week turnaround for revisal?
Yeah, that happens a lot. That's a good point, Jenny. 2 weeks is a quick time to do revision. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming to the author portion of our info session. And there we are.